This outstanding book, which seems to stem from the mists of ancient time, has saved itself through all the changes of the ages.
Hello, welcome to Premier Scene. I'm Claire Bueno as we changed our destiny at a very special screening of Wisdom of Changes.
And the most mature wisdom of life has accumulated around its text over 3,000 years. A holy book, since it contains all the archetypes of a rich, creative life.
Bettina, lovely to meet you. Now,
Thank you.
Tell us about Richard Willem, your grandfather, and his journey, really.
Well, he was a pioneer, really a pioneer, bringing Eastern wisdom to the West. And he went over to China as a missionary, but did not baptize a single Chinese. He did missionary work like school and hospital, but no baptizing. And he got very deep into Chinese wisdom and culture and brought it back. And then later got famous with his Book of Changes, which is equivalent like the Bible in the West. So that's the wisdom of changes in China.
The thing as well that struck me with the documentary was that your grandfather was a great humanitarian as well, wasn't he?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think this is for me one of the most modern things today. I mean, his insights and his attitude. Yeah.
He was very forward thinking for the time, actually, wasn't he?
Yeah. Very much so. I mean, he already knew that, I mean, cultures could only survive if they will be growing together and to get then to the very core of them, besides fashions. And this is where the big truths lie, which are also modern today and will be always.
What I found beautiful within the documentary and how it was carved isn't just telling the story of your grandfather's journey to China and the translations, but you're threading as well the philosophies of the I Ching through the documentary and enlightening the audience.
Yes, because I wanted to show what fascinated Richard Willem so much about this Chinese philosophy, that he put all his life's work in it. And I think when one sees that it's a sort of immediacy of wisdoms one gets, and also how to handle the changes in history and life. So it's a huge pool of wisdom and advice. This I wanted to also show a bit.
And the documentary seems very contemplative as well.
Yes, I think since there's so many themes, and I wanted to catch also the qualities of maybe Doest wisdom, and sort of to slow down a bit. And I think one needs to get out of the rush from time to time to get insights.
And it's not, for me as well, didn't feel just about your grandfather, but a personal journey for you and reconnecting to your past. Would I be right in that?
Oh yes, absolutely. Because as a child, I didn't care at all. I mean, me being in China and this grandfather, and then I come to a point in life, and I said, oh well, that's interesting, but I don't know anything of it. So I'm a filmmaker, and so this was my journey to learn to know him, and it was a great journey.
Asher, you had the joy of editing the documentary. The first thing that struck me about the piece is this wonderful pacing. And this contemplative as you're watching it. It gives the audience time, doesn't it?
I hope, yeah. If you say, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a film about the move of wisdom from the East to the West. And the East, one of the fundamental things about wisdom is contemplation, and so it was important to bring that other, I would say, other rhythm of life in a way, which is.
When I spoke to Bettina, to me it wasn't just about the story of her grandfather Richard, but also enlightening the audience about the philosophies of the I Ching. And what was beautiful with the documentary as well was the imagery and bringing us back to the trigrams. I noticed very subtly you brought that through, and it threads through the documentary. Can you tell us more about how you wanted to piece that together?
It's let's say that in a strange way, this was one of the most interesting films I edited, because normally when we make a film, we have especially is an film that is related to history and so on. We have a lot of archive material, but Wilhelm, the grandfather of Bettina, all his activities was before the invention of cinema. So there was a real problem, or challenge, I would say, how to make a film when you don't, about, you know, a period when there are not at all cinematic material. So this challenge brought us to, in fact, to fight or to deal with how to bring another level, not only in terms of historic tales, also of wisdom. And so we used a lot of also diagrams and in fact all these Chinese amazing graphics of the I Ching, which are thousands of years ago, are astonishingly modern in my view. Even the signs and so on, extremely clever, and also, you know, beyond the. So we used that plus a work of editing, not only between pictures, not only, also within paintings, within. But the most challengeable thing was how to tell a story which is dealing with the wisdom that moved from the east to the west, thanks to Wilhelm, but through the personal story of Bettina, because it's how she is embodying all this transfer, and I hope we succeed in it. I think this was a challenge. I believe it's a very moving film. I am extremely happy with it.
Jonathan, how did you first become attached to this wonderful project?
Very, very simple. I was asked to do it. And Bettina is a friend of a friend, and we met, and she told me a little about her grandfather and the project, and it seemed an interesting thing to do. I knew nothing about it, and like a lot of things, I try to choose things to do that I can, you know, learn about, and that's gone throughout all my work, whether I travel somewhere or I learn about a personality or whatever.
Well, everything about acting is about connecting with the person that you're portraying. So when you were reading the works of Richard, what was it that resonated with you?
Well, I don't know whether there was anything that resonated other than thinking this was an incredibly interesting man, and that people should and could learn about what happened and about his translation and about China at the time. So it was just a learning process for me. And I got to go to Berlin for 3 days, which was it's always very attractive.
Tell me, you were the kind of inspiration behind all this, weren't you, for Bettina?
In a way, yeah. The first time I met Bettina, I said, Bettina Willem, are you related to the famous Wilhelm? And she said, what famous Wilhelm? And this is how it all started. She, for me, he was a great inspiration for many, many years, and I was so excited to meet her. And then, through this question, she began an incredible quest that led to this wonderful film. So,
and one of the tasks that you had with the documentary was to be the researcher. So where do you begin with such a huge undertaking?
Yeah, it was a huge undertaking, and we did a lot of the research together. And because in my own work, I deal with kind of east-west connections, and so we were looking both at his life and the history of the I Ching and the transmission to the West and so on.
Was it important to have a structure to how the documentary was going to go from the beginning, to allow you to be able to tailor what you did research, because it is such a huge subject, not only the I Ching, but also Richard's trip and work and living over in China. I mean, it could go anywhere, couldn't it, really? So did you have to be careful about, because you could have so much information, you just don't know what to do with it?
Well, in the beginning, there was so much information and we didn't know what to do with it. But as we progressed, Bettina began to to have an idea of where she wanted to take it, and that she wanted to really focus on the personal side. And so it really came out of the material and the trips we went to China. One of the first trips to China was to the caves where he had this vision, and she realized that the axis would be a personal axis, and that's how it developed.
Now, I believe you've got an important part actually with the fruition of the title. Tell us more.
Well, it was a situation where Bettina had been doing the research for years, and she'd finally got to the point of going, okay, I'm going to make this now, and I need to come up with a title that works in English and German. So we sat in this coffee bar on Goethestrasse in Berlin for about 3/4 of an hour or more, just trying out different versions of change and I Ching and life and things. And eventually we came up with this title that worked in English, that also worked in German. And it took a long time, a lot longer than I think either of us thought it would. And we tried it out on a couple of our German friends, like within an hour, and they go, yes, that's a really great title. So that became it, and it was just a really nice thing. But it was like that coffee bar will be forever the I Ching life-changing title coffee bar,
And for you, you're a screenwriter, so being careful with the use of how you use words is really important, isn't it? Really,
utterly. And it's interesting as my career's developed now. Spinning things on 4 or 5 words has become normal. I mean, I had this little workshop last week in Berlin where there was a Dutch project that needed a title for an application they were making, and everyone was standing in this corridor desperately trying to get a log line together. And I'd read the treatment, and I just went into a room and I wrote down a mouse, an owl, and friendship, which was actually the 3 key things of the film. And I went, one little girl's world, a mouse, an owl, and friendship. And you thought, yeah, no, that is the film. And you just you end up having this sort of ability to play with words, to come up with, to encapsulate something. So it's amazing.
And today is a documentary, so is there a certain path? Do you have to follow plot points as you would with a normal narrative?
Yeah, I mean, most of the rules that you would apply to construction of fiction clearly still apply to documentary. And the big difference is the way in which the audience approaches the material. In documentary, they give you a lot more freedom than they do in fiction. In fiction, you have to convince them of things. In documentary, as long as you present it, people go with it. But you still have to have the story narrative. You still have to edit to key points. You have to structure using questions. All the same stuff still applies.
Jane, you did the translation for The Wisdom of Changes. Can you tell us more about the process that you went through?
Well, it was quite a tricky process because the interviews with the academics were relatively easy to translate. But the real core of the film is the personal journey which Bettina has, getting to discover who her grandfather was and establishing a kind of imaginary relationship with him. And his writing is very poetic and extremely individual. He's a very fine writer. So to get the tone of that was quite tricky. We had to make sure that we translated it fairly literally first, and then I really tried to get the feel of it and the language. She checked whether that was sufficiently accurate, and then we went back to finding a sort of compromise which worked. So it was quite a lot of work to get the real feel of the film and the character of his writing.
Because you're translating it from German, aren't you? Yeah. So you have to collect the same sensitivities and feeling that he's trying to portray.
Yes, exactly. And the same with hers as well, because she is very much reflecting in her own individual way. And again, she's good at English, but she's not completely fluent, So we wanted to get that right as well. So it was a lot of collaborative work and very enjoyable too.
Because it's very important to say as well, this is a personal journey for Bettina as well, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's an interesting mixture because it deals with a lot of very good and fascinating historical material, but it also is essentially a personal journey, and not just a personal journey in terms of going to China and finding out exactly what he did, but trying to discover who this man was and entering into a sort of imaginary relationship with him, which gives the film, I think, a very particular flavour and makes it actually quite moving.
Far off, I wanted to go, into life, away from the narrow world, where everything was certain and ordinary And I began to wonder about this planet that we call Earth, and the great riddles of existence. Why all this is as it is.